Talk to me. Talk to me.
Hello and welcome. I'm Dan Gersten, host of Chatting with History, where you can listen in to conversations I have with some of the most famous characters in the history of Western civilization. And today's guest is no exception. In fact, it probably doesn't get more famous than he. It's God, the Creator, the one true God, the Almighty, omnipresent, omnipotent, and an entity that gets really pissed off if you don't listen to him and obey his laws. At least that's what billions of people believe. Allah, Jesus, Jehovah, Yahweh, Adonai. He goes by many names, and differences in the name by which he's called and how he's worshipped has had people killing each other for thousands and thousands of years. So, without further delay, let's meet God. God, welcome to the show. God? This is Dan Gersten, from Chatting with History. We had arranged to chat with you at this time.
What? Chatting with history? What time is it?
It's 2 p.m. here in Tucson, Arizona, on the 30th of August in 2013 AD. I'm not sure what time it is where you are.
Yeah, I can relate. There are times when I'm not even sure what time I'm at. Especially since I'm supposed to be everywhere at the same time. Really, it gets hard keeping up with my whereabouts. And, the time zones. Guess that's why I have my staff of angels to take charge of my calendar.
Yes, I know. It's taken years for my people to get a hold of your people, angels, in order to schedule this chat. Seen the times that we'd never get you on our show. You were booked so far in advance.
Yeah, I'm pretty busy. I'm a pretty busy being, and every day it seems that there are emergencies that I have to deal with on a first-come, first-served basis. And then there are all the frivolous requests and demands for my attention. There is just no end to them.
Which is why I really appreciate your finding the time and agreeing to come on our show.
Well, I've been putting it off for too long, and I felt that your show would be a pretty good way to get some things off my chest without having someone pretending to speak for me or just spouting bullshit and saying it came from me. It's just far too much of that crap going around.
Again, I appreciate that, and you're right about the crap. I do have to ask you, though, how did you find the time, given all the demands people put on you?
I had one of my friends, a god from another world, one that doesn't require as much attention of him as this world requires of me, to mind the store, so to speak. He owed me a favor and said that he was actually looking forward to spending time watching over beings as dysfunctional as those on Earth.
Beings as dysfunctional as are those on Earth? You mean there are other worlds? And they're populated? And that the people, beings on them are less dysfunctional than our Earthlings?
Why, of course there are other worlds, and of course they're populated. Pretty arrogant, if I say so myself, for anyone on Earth to believe that it's the only populated planet. As for the people on Earth being more dysfunctional than those on other planets, look around you.
Well, I know they're dysfunctional. Anyone that has half a brain and is paying attention to what's going on in 2013 can tell you that. But I surely can't compare them to beings on other planets now. Can I?
Well, I guess you got me there. And, you'll just have to take my word for it.
So, what led you to create this world? You did create it, didn't you?
Many believe I did, but I didn't do it by myself. And in some ways, I had to do it.
Had to do it? And didn't do it by yourself?
Well, to be honest with you, it was a class project.
What? My Lord, Eve was right.
Yeah, can you believe it? And you know, Eve never lies. Well, except when it comes to eating that forbidden fruit and telling Adam she's not going shopping. And well, anyway, I was in Mrs. B's class, third year of God school, and she hands out this assignment where each of us has to create a world, populate it, and then manage the creatures in it based on some scenarios she gave us.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, and that's what I thought too at the time. Still, it was an assignment. So Mrs. B gave us each the same Create a World kit and the same rules for the assignment.
Rules? Like what?
Well, let's see. I mean, it was quite a long time ago, though parts of it do seem like it was only yesterday. Each of us had to create a world and then a place on the world that could sustain life. Then each of us had to populate that place with all sorts of creatures, including a male and a female human with whom we could interact. And lastly, we had to train them so that they listened to us and led healthy and loving lifestyles. In short, each of us had to create a paradise. And throughout the project would be graded based on how well we handled each task and how well our worlds and the humans in them turned out.
And how well did you do?
Well, not as well as I would have liked. I was mostly getting C's, and as of now, my overall grade is an I for incomplete.
Incomplete? You mean your work is not done?
Well, of course not. I mean, not with all the dysfunctional beings I created. Oh, how I wish my world had turned out like the ones a number of my classmates created, but I found the project to be just so hard.
Come now. I mean, you're God, or at least a God. I mean, what could be so hard?
Well, to begin with, like many a create-it-yourself kit, the instructions were in Swedish, and I hadn't taken languages yet. Still, it did seem to be going well in the beginning.
Seems that way. Well, at least based on how the book of Genesis starts out. See, I created the heaven and the earth. Then I created the light and divided it from the darkness, calling the light the day and the darkness the night. Then I created a firmament to divide the waters from the waters. Divide the waters from the waters. I mean, like you supposedly did with the Red Sea? No. The Red Sea was more of a comb over. I mean, this time around, I divided the waters below the firmament from the waters above the firmament. And I called the firmament heaven. Then I gathered all the waters under the heaven in one place and let the dry land appear, calling the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters, the seas. Wow, that was a lot to do. And I know I'd have trouble doing that. I mean, even if I had a Create a World kit. Tell me about it. Plus, I wasn't even half done with the creation. I still had to let the earth put forth the grass, herb yielding seed after its kind, and a tree bearing fruit, wherein is the seed thereof. After these, I let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven, to divide the day from the night, and for them to be signs, and for seasons, and for days and years. Can you say that again, I mean, this time in English? Or haven't you taken that language yet?
No need to be insolent, young man.
Sorry, I mean, I couldn't help it. I mean, you made me this way.
Oh, stop blaming me. Lord, how I wish people would stop blaming me for how they turned out and take some responsibility already.
Okay. Meanwhile, again, I mean, what did you do?
I made the sun, the moon, and the stars and put them in the firmament so they would give light upon the earth.
Why didn't you just say that the first time?
It sounds more godlike the way I said it first, no?
You've got me there. So what did you next do? And can you please just say it in English?
Oh, okay. I populated the waters with all sorts of creatures, from the smallest organism to the greatest of sea monsters, and I populated the skies with birds. Afterwards, I let the earth make all the other living creatures. Cattle, beasts, creepy things, stuff like that.
And then we're told that you created humans.
Yeah, but the truth be told, as I look around today, I probably should have stopped with the land creatures. That way, I think I'd be happier with the incomplete grade.
But you didn't stop, did you?
No, I didn't. So, I created man in my own image, male and female, and I told them what I had done. Having given them dominion over all the other creatures I had created, as well as every herb and fruit tree, the seeds of which shall be for their food, as well as the food of all the other creatures I had created, wherein there is a living soul that I had also created.
Okay, I got this part. At least I think I do, having learned it in Hebrew school when I was a child.
Hebrew school? Are you one of the chosen?
If you're asking me if I'm Jewish, yes, I am.
I thought you looked familiar.
Yeah, I know. All of us Jews look the same.
Well, kind of. But then all humans are created in my image, regardless of their faith, or race, or sexual preference.
Fair enough. So where does this Garden of Eden we've heard about fit in?
That came after I created the human male. I planted a garden toward the east that caused to grow there every tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for food. I created a river to water the garden, which upon flowing out of it split into 4 rivers named Pishon, Gihon, Tigris, and the Euphrates. And then I placed the human male there.
It's written that you also placed the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil in the garden.
That I did. But I really didn't want to place that tree of knowledge there. It came with the Create a World kit, but I really didn't want to use it, as I knew it would only cause trouble. But according to Mrs. B's rules, I had to use everything that was in the kit. But to keep the humans away from eating that tree's fruit, I told them that eating from that tree would cause them to surely die. And I posted warning signs all around it that read, "Stay away from this tree," and that means you. As well as Surgeon General warning, "Eating fruit from this tree can be hazardous to your health."
Yeah, but no one really pays attention to Surgeon General warnings.
I know, but it was worth a try.
Now, here's where the story gets complicated. And, to be honest with you, confusing. It's said that you said, "It is not good that the man should be alone. I will make him a helpmate for him." And then, out of the ground, you supposedly formed every beast of the field and fowl of the air and brought them to the man so he could name them.
If that's what it says, I said.
Well, it is. Right there in chapter 2 of the book of Genesis. The thing I don't understand is that in chapter 1, the tale of creation, it's written that you created the beasts and fowl, and for that matter, the herbs and trees before you created man. But that seems to be contradicted by what's in chapter 2.
Yeah, kind of confusing, isn't it? Why, I'd even have trouble believing that story if I hadn't experienced it myself. Personally, I don't sweat the details, especially when it's a good story, so why don't we just say that what I created outside the garden, I created inside the garden later on and leave it at that?
Okay, fair enough. After all, I wasn't there and it said that you were. So you populated the garden with animals and birds to keep the man company. What now?
Well, I thought I had done a good job at creating companions for the man, especially since I had created a dog. But that wasn't good enough for him. So I caused a deep sleep to fall upon him as he slept, I took one of his ribs, which I replaced with flesh.
Oh, is this the part where you took Adam's rib and made a woman out of it?
Oh, you heard this before.
Sure, who hasn't? Still, why don't you go on? As you said, it's a good story.
Okay, well, I made a woman and brought her unto man, who said to them, This is the bone of my bones and the flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, because she was taken out of man.
Okay, I know you're God and all, but I do have to stop you. After all, you did say Eve doesn't lie. You know that both Adam and Eve were guests on Chatting of History, don't you?
Of course I do. I know everything. Why, Adam couldn't stop talking about it after you invited him onto the show. And after the show, there was no talking to him, strutting around like he was some TV star. As for Eve, well, we really hadn't stayed in touch. Guess she really hadn't forgiven me for what happened to her first two sons.
Well, can you blame her?
Not really, and it seems her inability to forgive is something she got from me.
That's what she said. Anyhow, when Eve was on, she said that the whole story about she being created from Adam's rib was just a story you made up. Plus, Adam said that he doubted that story as well, since he can't find any scar.
Well, she did she? Unbelievable. What else did she tell you?
Eve said that she and Adam were created at the same time, just in different parts of the garden. And she said one of the main reasons was related to the relationship of your parents.
Damn! She told you about my parents? Oh, how I wish I had made her better able to keep her mouth shut.
Maybe she's just getting back at you.
Perhaps. Can we move on, please?
Okay, after all, who am I not to do as God asks? So, back to the garden. What's the story with the serpent? Oh, damn. Excuse me, I have to get this. Hello? Yes, Mom. Yes, Mom. Okay, Mom. Fine, Mom. Okay, listen, gotta go. Yeah, love you too, Mom. Bye. Okay, where were we? You were just about to tell us about the serpent.
Sydney?
Yes, that's what both Adam and Eve said was the serpent's name. Why create a serpent if its purpose was just to create mischief and goad Eve into disobeying your command not to eat from the tree of knowledge?
Oh, oui, I know. In retrospect, I should have not made that serpent. But like the tree of knowledge, it was in the create a world kit. And again, there was Mrs. B's rule about using everything in the kit.
Sounds like you're blaming Mrs. B for how your garden turned out. That's not a very godly thing now. Is it?
No, it's not. Still, it was a very frustrating experience. And down deep, I guess I really wasn't a very good creator or manager of my creations.
In all honesty, I feel you were a pretty good creator. As for managing your creations, your human ones, you really sucked. And for what it's worth, you still do.
No need to rub it in. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to take Mrs. B's class again, and it seems I'm not as good as some of their gods in learning from my mistakes and controlling my mood swings, especially when I'm not listened to.
As are many of your human creations. Anyhow, one last thing before we move on. In the first chapter of the book of Genesis, it's written that you created man and woman, blessed them, and said unto them, be fruitful and multiply. But it wasn't until you kicked Adam and Eve out of the garden that you cursed her with the pain of childbirth. So the question is, had Eve not eaten from the tree of knowledge and then enticed Adam to do so as well, would the two of them have gotten to know each other and have had kids?
Good question. Over the millennia, I've learned to deal with questions like that simply by saying, don't take things in the Old Testament so literally. Just enjoy the story. Besides, I also told other living creatures to be fruitful and multiply, and many of them are currently extinct. So much for that working out, huh?
Well, okay. But unfortunately, even in 2013 AD, many of your human creations do take scripture quite literally. Take, for example, the view that many males have toward women, that they were made to be subservient to men, and that strong and independent women, seeking equality with men and wanting to make decisions about themselves, by themselves, need to be punished.
I knew after I made Adam that men were going to be a problem, and that the story I told him, you know, about making Eve from a rib of his, would come back to haunt me and their descendants.
So why did you tell him that cock and bull story?
Because I knew that his frail ego required him to think he was top dog. Still, I never thought it would become what it has thousands of years later, where men are referencing scripture to justify their presumed superiority over women.
Well, I mean, it has become that way.
So, sue me. I do have to say that I'm not responsible for what's in the Bible.
You're not? You know, I thought the Bible, especially the Old Testament, was told to Moses or someone by you.
Utter hogwash. I didn't tell anything to anybody, especially Moses, since the story of creation was known long before he was born, and even before I made a covenant with Abraham. Well, versions of creation, as well as the flood, and even the part about Moses as an infant being found floating in some basket in a river, can be found in many civilizations and cultures way before Abe and Moses, and way before the Old Testament was supposedly first written.
So, I mean, if the Old Testament isn't from you, who wrote it?
Darned if I know, and I'm supposed to know everything.
Well, I mean, what do I know?
Well, I know it was written by men who wanted to use the fear of me to control other people. They took earlier stories and legends associated with gods and took creative license to craft a story that would explain to relatively ignorant and fearful people why things were the way they were and why things should be as the Bible writers wrote it should be, with self-proclaimed priests running the show and with powerful rulers of the armies behind them.
And these men wrote the Bible to make women appear subservient?
You betcha. Like making it all Eve's fault. That she was the first to eat from the tree of knowledge, and that it was all Eve's fault that Adam also ate the fruit. If I had my way, I'd make sure that everyone knew that it was all my fault and not hers. I put the tree of knowledge of good and evil in the garden. I made Eve in my image and with qualities that I possessed myself, like curiosity and not always listening when being told not to do something without being given a good reason other than because I say so. Eve just couldn't help herself, and I should have known that. Damn that class project.
Yes. Still, I mean, you punished Adam and Eve and drove them from the garden, and it appears that many men are still blaming and punishing women for losing paradise.
That does appear true. Still, in the garden, Adam basically did very little, and he and I would sit and watch different animals play with each other. As I look at America today, I see a lot of men still doing very little and just sitting still, watching animals play with each other. The bears play the lions, the cardinals play the cubs. Yes, it seems that a lot of men want to get themselves back to the garden, only this time with pizza and chips and dip and beer.
Yeah, you know, I guess it's good to be king. You know, which is a good segue to talking about Jesus, whom many thought the king of the Jews.
Jesus? Hell, he wasn't any more king of the Jews than was Herod. Jay, that's what I call Jesus, was really a neat guy with progressive learnings who just wanted people to be more caring and loving towards one another. Last thing he wanted to be was the king of anyone, and the only reason he was given that title by the conservative Jewish priests and Roman authorities was so that he could be tried and executed.
Billions of people, your creations, believe Jesus to be your son.
Sure, why not? All of my creations are my children, and every person has me within them. I believe that's the message Jay was trying to impart to those who wanted to listen to him. I know that's what I wanted him to have him say.
So, what's the story about you impregnating the Virgin Mary who bore your son?
Again, some really creative writing based on earlier myths and designed to help Jews dissatisfied with the existing faith and priesthood promote a new religion with them in charge.
Earlier myths?
Sure, why not? Many civilizations and cultures told of gods descending from some high place and cavorting with human women. No reason to exclude me from doing so now, was there? Plus, to be honest, I was portrayed and perceived by many as not a nice god, a deity with mood swings bordering on polar disorder. So making a kind and peaceful Jay appear as a god or son of me would help this new religion gain converts, no? So they used him to foster love and hope for some salvation, while still using me to strike fear into those who might be tempted to question or disobey authority and their rules, some of which were pretty anal, restrictive, and repressive, if I do say so myself.
So, kind of like good cop, bad cop, just with gods.
Precisely. To keep people in line, priests and other clergy try the nice approach, saying that if people listen to them and do what they tell them to do, Jay will save them in some way in the afterlife. And if that doesn't work, they'll wheel me out like some old geezer in a wheelchair and threaten them with me sending them to some inferno for eternity, or bringing some horrible being to befall on them and their loved ones.
And you just let this happen? Isn't there some commandment that this behavior is breaking, like taking the name of the Lord in vain or not bearing false witness?
Not much I can really do about it these days.
What does that mean? You kicked Adam and Eve out of the garden. You flooded the world, killing everyone except for Noah and his family. You brought 10 plagues down upon Egypt. You destroyed cities. Where's the Old Testament God that we've come to love and fear?
Well, a lot of the other gods felt that I had reacted inappropriately when I lost my temper and destroyed things and people that I had created, which, by the way, is a no-no. So, I was brought in front of the Council of the Most High. They found me guilty of violating the Prime Directive and ordered me to back off on what they called my over-meddling in the affairs of humans on Earth. So now I can only watch from afar and shake my head in amazement and disappointment. Trust me, there are many times when I wish I could have put the fear of God in a number of people, especially those false prophets pretended to speak to and for Jay and myself.
Now, that's a real shame, maybe even a sin. I'm not a praying person, but if I was, I'd be praying for you to bring down the wrath of you on all the pseudo-clergy preaching hate and divisiveness in your name.
Not to mention all the times throughout your history when people made war and killed each other because they differed in the way they believed in me, Jay, and this guy Muhammad. Boy, how I wished I could have stopped the Crusades, not to mention the Holocaust.
So basically, you are forbidden from doing anything on Earth?
Pretty much so. At least not without permission from the Central Council and the Most High. And it's a real pain to fill out all the paperwork. The bureaucracy.
So all of these people on Earth, praying to you for something from you, or what? Praying in vain?
Oh, not necessarily. Prayer by itself has been known to be quite beneficial, and while I can't respond or react to prayers, praying can give a person strength and hope, as well as motivate them to action. So, prayer, as long as it's not a prayer for something bad to happen, is a good thing in my view. Praying for someone dropping dead just because you don't like them, their beliefs or their behavior, not so much.
But all of these athletes and celebrities, winning games, contests, and awards, who thank you. What's with that?
You know, if they want to believe that I help them in some way, that's cool. But as you know, I had nothing to do with any of that. Besides, even if I could affect things on Earth, I wouldn't play favorites.
Yeah, but surely you did at one time. Preferring Abel over Cain, so much so that your favoritism led Cain to kill his brother?
Oh, I know. There are a number of things I did that I regret. But again, I don't do that anymore, and even if I did, I can't. And you know what?
What?
Those who believe in God, whether Jay or me, who creates winners while causing others to be losers, just don't have a clue about the God they're pretending to believe in. All humans are my children, and in that regard, all humans are equal in Jay's and mine eyes. Jay and I are more concerned about things like hunger, sickness, poverty, and war, and could care less about some sporting event or entertainment award. Really now.
Yeah, tell me about it. Pretty arrogant of some to say that they're more blessed by you, or Jay, than some other person or team or nation. And I thought pride was one of the 7 deadly sins. It doesn't seem as if there are any deadly sins these days.
Nope, not since I was ordered to keep away from meddling. So now no matter how many sins are committed in my name or how many times my commandments are broken, there's nothing I can really do about it.
Real shame if you ask me. Why, these days your commandments, as well as your and Jay's words, are used to commit loads of sins, as well as spread hate, especially toward women and homosexuals.
I know, but again, there's not much I can do about it except watch. And honestly, how many times I don't even bother with what's happening on Earth. It's just so frustrating. So I'll watch worlds that some of my classmates created. Why, imagine one of those worlds has advanced so much that there's no currency anymore, as well as no poverty, wars, religion, and hate. Talk about a paradise.
Wow, sounds very Star Trek. Or John Lennon. Anyhow, and again, here on Earth and in the United States, which was once viewed as a most enlightened country, millions of people hate other people and their lifestyles and justify their hate with words attributed to you, Jay, or some other character from the Bible.
Again, utter hogwash.
Still, words that you, Jay, and other biblical figures supposedly said are being used to justify spewing hate toward homosexuals and denying them the right to marry those whom they love. Did you view homosexuality as a sin? One that should be punishable with death?
Hell no. If I had viewed homosexuality as a sin, I would have forbidden it on those tables I gave to Moses. But thou shalt not be a homosexual or commit homosexual acts ain't on there, is it?
No, it's not. There's no commandment against homosexuality on those tablets. Maybe it's the 11th commandment.
Come on now, there ain't no such commandment. But I'll tell you what is on those there tablets. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not covet what is your neighbor's, thou shalt not bear false witness. And you know what?
What?
From what I see, many of those railing against homosexuality and marriage equality don't appear to have any problem with people breaking any of the commandments I just mentioned, and some of them breaking multiple commandments over and over. Talk about hypocrisy. Now, why, in this place called South Carolina, they just elected an adulterer to be a lawmaker. Hell, a breaker of my law is now making their law.
Tell me about it. And one of the most hypocritical things is how those who take Scripture so literally complain every time some government agency or rights watchdog group prevents them from displaying the Ten Commandments on public property.
You know, there are times I wish I'd never given Moses them tablets. Besides, I gave them to the Jewish people, not to others, so I'm kind of amused every time they act as if I gave it to them.
What do you mean? The Ten Commandments are just for Jewish people?
Well, that's how I intended it. I mean, I didn't give them directly to any others, now did I?
No, but still, Jesus, he was Jewish, as were his apostles, as well as most of the early Christians, no? So, doesn't that make the Ten Commandments theirs too?
At first, maybe, but not now. Not after they broke 2 of the first mentioned commandments. Thou shalt have no other gods before me, and honor the Sabbath and keep it holy.
What are you talking about?
Well, they made a child of mine, namely Jay, equal to me, and seeing as there's so many Christians praying to Jay and not me, it's as if they placed another god before me, and that's a no-no. And then they went and changed the Sabbath from sunset Friday to sunset Saturday to Sunday, and that's certainly not honoring the Sabbath, now is it? So I have little patience and compassion for those who elevate the Ten Commandments as my laws while breaking my laws whenever they see fit.
Tell me about it. Hypocrisy rules among those claiming to be the most devout. Yeah, seems it's always been that way. And it's gotten worse since Catholics created the sacrament of confession. What a crock that is. What do you mean? Well, the Jewish people have just one day of atonement a year. Yom Kippur. So that means they have to carry the weight of all their sins around with them for an entire year. The Jews who followed Jay and created a religion around him, they didn't like that aspect of Judaism. So they made it so sinners could ask forgiveness and repent simply by telling a priest what they had done and asking for forgiveness. Well, of course, in exchange for something of value. Yeah, kind of like buying forgiveness in exchange for not having a heavy conscience. Bingo! Some racket, huh? And let me tell you, most of the sins that are confessed, they don't even make it up to me or Jay. So when these priests and other clergy are granting some absolution, it's not coming from either of us. And boy, let me tell you, are those sinners gonna be stunned when they die and aren't allowed into heaven? So, there's a heaven?
Kind of. You remember my telling you about the world another God created? The one without poverty, hate, death, and war?
Of course I do.
Well, that world, and others like it, are kind of heaven, especially when compared to Earth. And good Earthlings, when their existence on Earth ends, are reborn, so to speak, into one of those worlds.
Really? What about some of these near-death experiences where people who supposedly died and came back to life reported that they had seen dead friends and family members?
Well, some of that may be true, but that's assuming that all of one's dead friends and family members weren't sent elsewhere.
Sent elsewhere? So there is a hell?
Again, kind of. Sinners can be reborn as Earthlings or reborn into some world worse than this one. I may have gotten an incomplete grade for this world, but there are other gods who got D's and F's for their class assignment.
So, if there's a hell or so, is there a Satan? A devil? The personification of evil?
Yes and no. In some ways, it can be considered a Satan.
No way. Really? What's that about?
Well, priests and others created the notion of there being a devil in order to explain to the relatively ignorant and fearful why bad things happen. They couldn't blame them on me now, could they? And the last thing that they even consider is a God with the mood swings and a darker side.
You have a dark side?
Of course, we have a darker side. All the gods have darker sides. And the true measure of how godly we are comes down to how well we are able to control that part of our essence. After all, aren't some terrible natural disasters called acts of God?
Well, sure. But I never really thought those events were caused by you.
Well, not directly, and surely not as punishment for evil of humans. I mean, as much as I would like to at times, the Prime Directive, remember? Plus, I'm on a probation. Even so, the climate and weather and the cycle of nature are all built into the world that I created thanks to Mrs. B. And anyone on Earth who says that some storm or tornado or flood or fire was because I was pissed and wanted to punish some people is full of it. And that they should think of their lucky stars because if it were up to me, I'd send some natural disaster their way.
So again, you and other gods have a dark side.
Sure, and how can we not? After all, we're supposed to know everything, good and evil. And I think that maybe been one of the objectives of Mrs. B's class assignment.
What was?
Well, to begin with, I think Mrs. B wanted to see if we gods could resist our dark side when we got frustrated in creating our worlds and managing the creatures in it. And I think Mrs. B wanted to see if we could prevent our human creations from developing their dark side.
Well, if Mrs. B wanted you to prevent your human creations from developing their own dark side, she probably should have given you a Create a World kit that didn't contain the tree of the knowledge of good and evil that you had to use, nor make its fruit so tempting, being good for food and a delight to the eyes.
Again, tell me about it. First, there was that damn tree, and then making the situation worse. We had to create humans in our own image. So I knew that despite all the warnings, despite threatening Adam and Eve with death, should they eat from that tree, that sooner or later, one of them would take the first bite.
Yeah, sure seemed that there was no way the fruit from the tree of knowledge wouldn't be eaten. Especially since Sydney was also in that kit.
Freaking serpent. Saw that Eve was being left alone when Adam and I spent all that time watching animals play each other and squirmed its way into her life, whispering sweet nothings into her ear about eating the fruit, telling her she wouldn't die, telling her the fruit tasted good, telling her eating from the tree would make her wise.
And evidently, what Sydney was saying was pretty convincing. Certainly more so than those warning signs and threats of death. And, as it turned out, the serpent was right. She and Adam didn't die after eating the fruit.
Yeah, Sydney called my bluff. Killing Adam and Eve wasn't part of the assignment. And as much as I may have wanted to, I controlled my dark side. Besides, deep down, and like I said earlier, it was my fault, not theirs, and not Sydney's.
Well, let me come out and just ask you, because I'm a little confused, again based upon what's written in Genesis.
Once more, don't take what's in the Bible so literally.
Fine, but still, were Adam and Eve kicked out of the garden because they ate from the tree of knowledge? Because they didn't listen to you, or because of some other reason?
Yes, yes, and yes. Once they had eaten from the tree of knowledge, they became wise, and they themselves became godlike, or as I reportedly say, behold, the man is becoming as one of us to know good and evil. So I had to kick them out as they would have been a threat to us gods.
A threat to you and other gods?
Yes, they now knew what we knew, and with this knowledge might one day recognize that, being the creation of gods, they could be gods themselves and challenge us, kind of like what they did in Greek and other mythologies. The only thing really preventing this was their mortality. So Adam and Eve were banished from the garden to prevent them from eating from the tree of life, which would have made them immortal like us. It's also why the garden is hidden, and why I placed east of the garden cherubim and the flaming sword which turned every way to keep the way to the tree of life secure.
That's some story.
Isn't it now? But in a lot of ways, no more a story than are the legends and myths of other gods and creation stories, whether Greek, Roman, Assyrian, Mayan, or some other ancient civilization.
Well, we've just about reached the end of our show, and it looks like we have a little time left to field some questions that our audience submitted to us once they learned that you were coming to be on our show. Do you mind?
Of course not. I mean, it's easier for me to answer questions than some ridiculous prayers.
Okay. Here's one from Be Truthful in Tennessee. Dear God, did the Ark of the Covenant exist? And if so, where is it today?
Great question. The Ark of the Covenant did exist. It was built according to instructions I gave Moses shortly after I gave him the Ten Commandments, and inside the Ark were the 2 tablets. As for its location, let's just say that it's not on Earth. The Ark has the capability of being a weapon of mass destruction, and the Council of the Most High removed the Ark so that no human could ever find it and use it for evil, which I and most other gods know that's how it would be used.
Wow. I guess Indiana Jones finding it in Egypt wasn't true.
Hell, that's Hollywood, and they love making up lots of things just to enrich themselves.
Here's another question from A Theist in Massachusetts. A lot of people claim that the remains of Noah's Ark can be found on Mount Ararat, which is in present-day Turkey. Is that where the Ark landed?
Wow, a lot of Ark questions. To tell the truth, I'm not really sure where Noah's Ark landed. There was still a lot of water around. But I can tell you this, no remains of the Ark exist. After all, just imagine, you just landed on some mountainside after a great flood, and you're the only ones around. And you're gonna need shelter for yourself, your family, and your animals. And you're gonna need fuel for fire with which to cook and keep warm. After about 2 or 3 or so years after their landing, Noah and his family had used all of the wood from the Ark, for shelter and fire. So anyone who believes they found its remains are mistaken or con men.
Looks like we have time for one more question. This one's from I'm a Believer in Tucson, Arizona. I saw Chatting with History when it had Adam on and later when Eve was on. They mentioned your name isn't Allah, Adonai, Jehovah, Yahweh, or anything like that. And that it's Jerry Eden. How can that be?
Those first 2 humans sure have big mouths, and let me tell you, there are many times when I wish I had made them mute. Yeah. My name is Jerry. Gerald, actually. Or maybe it's Geraldine? But only my mom calls me that. And I don't know about other Jerrys, but I didn't like being called that by humans. It made me seem like one of those guys and not a supreme being. And as for Eden, well, it was my garden, wasn't it? And Garden of Eden certainly has a more heavenly ring to it than, say, Jerry's garden. So my name is Gerald or Geraldine Eden, depending on what my gender mood is. And you can call me that or Jerry if you want to. As I mentioned earlier in the show, it really doesn't matter what you call me, as I'm not that interested in listening. And again, I'm on probation, so I couldn't answer anyone's prayers, even if I wanted to.
Well, for sure. Now we've just about run out of time. So I'd like to thank you, God, Jerry, for coming on the show. Are there any parting comments you'd like to leave with our audience?
Of course, Dan. It's why I came on Chatting with History. Given that I'm on probation for interacting with Earthlings, your show gives me a rare opportunity to get my word out. So, before I begin, let me thank you for having me on your show, and I hope that you'll have me back. First off, I am your creator, and you are my creations. Well, kind of. However, while a lot of you believe I created the universe out of some divine inspiration, it was a freaking class project. Duh! And the other gods, my classmates, also created universes, and let me tell you, a number of them did a better job than I did. So don't go running around thinking that you're all hot shit or something like that. There are other inhabited worlds out there, some of which are far more advanced than here on Earth and its human inhabitants. And they've overcome their arrogance in thinking there's some gift of God and that they're blessed or something like that.
Secondly, while I created the universe, I didn't create religion. That's a human creation, invented by people who realized that they could control others by having them believe that it was they who spoke to and for me. What poppycock. Using me, or the notion of me, to control people and not necessarily for good. And there are so many religions and cults, each having offshoots, and with offshoots, having offshoots, and all because each of them believes they're the only ones who know the right way to worship and follow me or Jay. If it were up to me, there'd be no religion other than the belief in one another. It's the prime reason I didn't make Adam or Eve religious and didn't interfere in how or whether people believed in me or how they practiced their beliefs, as long as it didn't cause harm to others.
Thirdly, Jay, Jesus to you, is indeed my son. But then, all humans are my children. Got that? All of you, made in my image and in the image of the other gods. And thanks to Eve, and you should be thanking her, all of you now have the knowledge of good and evil, which I tried to keep from you. In this regard, you are all gods, only you don't possess immortality. Each of you creates your own world and universe. Each of you has as much power as I do to answer your own prayers and to make your own dreams come true. And given I'm on probation, and have been for thousands of years, I guess you actually have more power than I do. So stop praying to me and asking me to do something on your behalf. And for sure, stop blaming me and Jay or this fictitious Satan for the bad things that happened to you or the sorry state of your life. Or, for that matter, blaming people who don't look, believe, and behave as you do for the presence of evil or for natural disasters. Enough of this crap!
Oh, one last thing. Today, there isn't a single person on earth with whom I speak. At one time, sure, but not these days. And surely these days, there's not a single person on earth who speaks for me. And there's not a single person on earth who knows my thoughts, my aims, my plan, or anything else having to do with me or Jay. So, Pat Robertson and other false prophets, take a freaking hike. Now, over the millennia, some curious people have wondered why I waited to make a covenant with Abraham and not with Noah, since I made he and his family the only survivors of the great flood. Well, it had to do with the number of honorable men during their respective times. Sure, Noah was an honorable man. It's one of the reasons I chose him to be one of the 7 ark builders. Well, that and the fact that his last name was Ark Builder. But he was just one of only a handful of honorable men at the time. Abe? Well, hell. He was the most honorable of men among thousands of honorable men, and that's the reason I waited. For there to be many honorable men among whom to choose. Looking around today, if I had to do it all over again, there's no way I'd make any covenant, as there's just so little honor. Shame, really. Almost makes me wish I could create another flood, and with those proclaiming themselves devout and pious, being the first I'd wash away. Just saying.
Words of wisdom from God. But then, it's God. And if there were going to be words of wisdom, who better to speak them? Now, I'm not an atheist, but I don't buy into the whole notion of a God that many religions attempt to teach us. And being Jewish, I learned to question the nature and existence of an almighty God who would sit by and allow his chosen people to be exterminated during the Holocaust, and throughout history for that matter, by Christians and others. Still, there's some comfort in feeling that one has a benevolent God, and a divine or spiritual presence cannot be denied when awed by the beauty and wonder of nature. Regardless, I'm with the God who is our guest today in feeling that God is in each and every one of us, and that all of us were created in the same image, and that until we realize, appreciate, and respect this notion, we will forever be doomed to be a world for which our Creator got an incomplete grade. So until our next Chatting with History, this is Dan Gersten, reminding all of you to seek God within yourself and each other, and not from a being that's on probation. Thank you for watching.
Talk to me.